Jack Carter had been riding through the wild plains of the West for days. His clothes were covered in dust, his hat low to shield his tired eyes from the harsh sun. His horse, a steady mare named Daisy, carried him through the dry terrain, its hooves kicking up clouds of dirt with each step. Jack was a cowboy, one of many who roamed the land in search of work or trouble. But right now he was looking for something else, a fresh start. For the past few months, Jack had been drifting from town to town. His last job had ended poorly, and he was eager to leave his past behind. He had heard rumors about an abandoned ranch up ahead, a place that had once been a thriving farm but was now abandoned and up for sale at a ridiculously low price of $35. It seemed too good to be true, but Jack figured that if the price was that cheap, maybe he could buy it and start a new life away from the troubles that had followed him. As Jack approached the ranch, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The land stretched out in front of him, dry and cracked. The house was a shadow of its former self, its wooden frame warped from years of neglect. The barn, a long, low building at the back of the property, was barely standing, the roof caving in at one corner. Weeds grew in thick patches around the house, and the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. The whole place felt abandoned. Despite the unsettling appearance, Jack was determined. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. He tied Daisy to the post outside the house and walked inside, the wooden door creaking as he pushed it open. The inside was as empty as the outside. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the corners of the room. Jack stepped carefully, trying not to disturb the silence. He walked through the house, his boots echoing on the wooden floors. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but it wasn't this. The place had clearly been empty for years. As Jack made his way through the house, he paused in front of the old staircase that led to the second floor. Something about the stairs caught his attention. They didn't look completely abandoned. He could swear there were recent marks on the floorboards, like someone had been there not too long ago. Curious, Jack decided to go up. The stairs groaned under his weight, but they held. As he reached the top, the first thing he noticed was a strange smell, like something had been left to rot for too long. The hallway at the top was dim, the only light coming from a small window at the far end. Jack moved down the hallway, his hand brushing against the walls as he walked. That's when he heard it, a faint sound like someone, or something, breathing. It was low, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't alone. He moved carefully, following the sound. As he got closer, it became clearer. The sound was coming from the barn. Jack's instincts told him to turn around and leave. He didn't know what he was walking into, but curiosity got the better of him. He turned back toward the stairs and made his way down to the front door. Outside, the air felt heavy, as if the wind had stopped moving altogether. The barn stood at the back of the property, far enough that it seemed to be almost a world of its own. Jack walked toward it, each step feeling heavier than the last. The barn was dark, its entrance barely visible from the overgrown plants that had taken over the land. As he approached, he noticed something strange, a faint light coming from inside, flickering through the cracks in the barn's walls. Jack hesitated, his hand resting on the door. For a moment, he wondered if he should turn back. But something told him he had to see it for himself. He pushed the door open, and the old wood creaked in protest. The barn was dark, save for the small sliver of light that shone through the cracks. Jack's eyes adjusted to the dimness, and that's when he saw them. 3 figures hung from the rafters, their bodies limp. The sight was so shocking that Jack took a step back, almost tripping over his own feet. The figures were women, their bodies suspended by long ropes. They wore clothing that looked old-fashioned, like something from a different time, and their skin was pale, almost too pale. Their hair hung in long, dark strands around their faces, and their hands were bound at their sides. For a moment, Jack thought they were dead, but then one of the women stirred. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching on the dirt floor. The woman who had moved raised her head, her eyes wide with fear. She gasped for air, her chest rising and falling quickly. She looked at Jack, but she didn't say anything. Her expression was one of shock, confusion, and something else. Recognition. Before Jack could react, the other 2 women started to move as well. They struggled against the ropes that held them, their faces twisted in pain. Jack rushed forward, pulling his knife from his belt and cutting the ropes that held them in place. The women fell to the ground with a soft thud, their bodies weak but alive. "Are you all right?" Jack asked, kneeling beside them. His voice was calm, but his mind was racing. What were they doing here? Why were they hanging in the barn like that? The woman who had moved first slowly sat up, her eyes locking onto Jack's. "Who are you?" she asked in a hoarse voice, her words laced with fear. "I'm Jack Carter," he said, offering a hand to help her stand. "I bought this ranch." "I'm here to help." The woman didn't take his hand. Instead, she looked at him for a long moment, as if studying him. Then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have come." Jack's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The other two women finally managed to sit up, though they looked weak and disoriented. One of them muttered something in a language Jack didn't understand, her voice soft but urgent. The first woman turned to the others, speaking to them in that same strange language. Jack could tell that they were communicating, but he had no idea what they were saying. The air in the barn felt thick, charged with an energy Jack couldn't explain. "Who are you?" Jack asked again, his voice more insistent now. "Why were you hanging in here?" The woman looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "We're not just anyone," she said slowly, as if choosing her words carefully. "We're part of something old, something dangerous." Before Jack could ask more questions, the sound of a horse approaching reached his ears. The woman's eyes widened, and she motioned for the others to stay quiet. "They're coming." Jack turned to look out of the barn. A figure on horseback was riding up the path toward the ranch. It was a man, tall and imposing. His face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but Jack could feel the danger in his presence. "Who is that?" Jack asked. The woman's voice dropped to a whisper. "A man named Chavez. He's been hunting us for years." Jack's mind raced. What had he stumbled into? And why was this man hunting these women? The answers he knew would have to wait. For now, he had to keep the women safe. The showdown was coming, and Jack didn't know if he was ready. But one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. The figure on horseback stood still outside the barn, his eyes scanning the darkened doorway. Jack's hand gripped the hilt of his gun, but he didn't draw it just yet. He knew that whatever was about to happen, it would come fast. The woman who had introduced herself as Shia motioned for Jack to step back, her eyes wide with fear. "He's dangerous," she whispered urgently. "You don't understand. He's not just a man. He's something else." Jack didn't have time to ask more questions. The man on horseback dismounted with a slow, deliberate movement. He wore a long coat, a wide-brimmed hat casting shadows over his face, and a belt full of weapons. His presence was intimidating. He walked toward the barn with a purpose, his boots crunching on the dry earth. "Are they here?" The man's voice was deep, cold and sharp, echoing across the silent ranch. Shia's face tightened with fear, and she grabbed the arm of one of the other women, Amina, pulling her to her feet. The third woman, Taya, stood motionless, her eyes locked on the approaching figure. "They are here," Shia answered, though her voice trembled. "But they're not going with you, Chavez." The man, Chavez, stopped just outside the barn, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife at his waist. His eyes gleamed in the dim light. "You think you can run from me?" he sneered, his tone full of disgust. "I've been hunting you for years, and you think hiding in some old barn will stop me?" Jack took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. "You won't take them," he said, trying to steady his nerves. His heart was racing, but he wasn't about to let these women be taken again. Chavez turned slowly to face Jack, a wicked smile tugging at his lips. "And who might you be?" he asked. His voice was laced with mockery. "Another lost cowboy looking for trouble?" "I'm Jack Carter, and I'm not going to let you harm them," Jack said, his hand still hovering over his gun. For a moment, Chavez said nothing. He just stared at Jack, sizing him up. Then he laughed, a low, menacing sound. "You think you can stop me?" he said, drawing the knife from his belt and spinning it in his hand. "You're not even a real threat." Shia, seeing the tension building, stepped forward. "Jack, you don't know what he's after," she said, her voice shaking with urgency. "He's not just after us. He's after our power." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Shia's eyes darted nervously between Jack and Chavez. She hesitated, but then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our tribe, our people were once powerful. We were connected to the land in ways no one understands. We have abilities, gifts, passed down through generations. Chavez wants to use us to control that power." Amina nodded, her face pale. "He's been trying to capture us for years. He believes if he controls us, he can control everything. The weather, the earth, the spirits of our ancestors. Jack's mind raced. He had heard rumors of strange powers in the West, but he had never believed them to be true. Now, standing here with these three women who seemed far more than ordinary, he understood. There was something deep, something ancient within them, and Chavez wanted to exploit it. Chavez, growing impatient, took another step toward the barn. "Enough talk," he growled. "I've been patient long enough. Hand them over." Jack's hand tightened around his gun. He knew he didn't have the skills to outfight this man in a straight-up battle, but he also knew that if Chavez took these women, there would be no stopping him from using their powers to destroy everything. Jack couldn't let that happen. Before Jack could say another word, Chavez lunged forward faster than Jack had expected. With a flash of steel, he swung the knife in a deadly arc, aiming straight for Jack's chest. But Jack was quicker. He dodged to the side just in time, the blade grazing his shoulder as he spun around. He grabbed the gun from his holster, aiming it at Chavez. "Stay back!" Jack shouted, his voice steady despite the pain in his arm. Chavez didn't stop. Instead, he smirked and stepped back, pulling a second knife from his belt. "You're going to regret this," he sneered. The air between them was thick with tension. Chavez's menacing grin spread across his face as he circled Jack, his knives flashing in the moonlight. Jack's heart raced, but he kept his focus. His hands were steady as he held the gun aimed at Chavez, his eyes locked on the other man's every move. Shaya, Amina, and Taya watched from the shadows, their eyes wide with fear. They knew this was the moment that would decide everything. If Jack couldn't stop Chavez, they would be lost, trapped in a life of slavery once more. Suddenly, Taya moved. Without warning, she stepped out of the shadows, her hands raised in the air. "Stop!" she called out in a voice that rang with an otherworldly power. The air around them seemed to shimmer as if the earth itself had heard her command. Chavez faltered for a moment, his knives lowered as he looked at Taya, surprised by the sudden surge of energy. But he quickly regained his composure, smirking. "Nice try, little girl," he sneered. "But you're not strong enough." Taya's face tightened with determination. "I won't let you take us," she said, her voice low and firm. In that moment, something incredible happened. The ground beneath them began to tremble, as if answering Taya's command. A low rumble echoed through the barn, and the air grew thick with energy. The earth shook violently, sending dust and debris flying into the air. Chavez staggered back, his eyes wide with shock. The ground beneath him cracked open, revealing a deep chasm of dark, swirling earth. Jack watched in awe as the power of the land itself seemed to come alive. Taya's eyes glowed with a strange light, and the spirits of the earth answered her call. Chavez, now clearly out of his element, stumbled backward. "What is this?" he gasped, fear creeping into his voice for the first time. "This is the power you tried to control," Shaya said, stepping forward. "The power of the land, the spirits, the forces that have always been here. And you cannot control it." Jack, feeling a surge of energy, raised his gun one last time, aiming not at Chavez but at the sky. He fired a single shot into the air, signaling to the world that the balance was restored. The rumbling stopped, and the earth settled. Chavez, realizing he was no longer in control, looked at the three women with a mix of fear and anger. He turned on his heel and fled, disappearing into the night. As the dust settled, Jack lowered his gun and turned to the women. They stood in silence for a moment, their faces filled with relief but also sadness. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. "You did it," Jack said, his voice full of admiration. Taya nodded slowly. "We didn't do it alone. The spirits of our ancestors were with us." Shaya stepped forward, her eyes meeting Jack's. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You helped us when no one else would." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "I didn't do it for thanks," he said. "I did it because it was the right thing." The women smiled, a silent understanding passing between them. The ranch, once a place of darkness, now felt like a place of peace. The land had been freed from the curse, and so had they. But Jack knew this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead. The Wild West was a land of mystery, and not all dangers were gone. But for now they had won, and that was enough.